Hi everyone, this is Crystal, and today I'm working in my 2020 December documented album. I'm not calling it daily this year because I'm not planning to do actual daily entries. I just don't think that that's going to happen this year. So I'm just hoping to document some stories from December. And you may have seen a few pages already. I have done a couple things using the Citrus Twist Kit's Sparkle and Joy kit. But today I'm actually going to be using some of the items from the December release. So I want to create my opening pages. So I already have my reason why started here. I still need to fill out the actual reason why, and I think I'm actually going to reprint this. But I want to create a title page, and then I also have this calendar that was one of the printables for the month of December. This was in the Traveler's Notebook Basics for December, so I want to include this in the front page as well. So that is my plan. I'm going to be using a couple of the stamp sets, the new stamp sets from this month. This is the Big Number set, and this is the Chloe Regular Alpha set. I want to create my title using these along with some Distress Oxide. I've pulled out a few of the printable ephemera from this month. I printed these and then cut them on my silhouette, so I have them ready to go. And I did print duplicates of a few of them just to fill out the page, and I've chosen a couple here that I think might work on my page. For the background, I'm going to be using this same paper that I used for this page here, that I used for the frame. This is just some super old Cosmo Cricut double-sided paper that I had in my stash, but it's the perfect colors to match this kit. And I'm thinking of using this side to create my title on. It works really well with these die cuts, as you can see. And then I also am thinking about adding a acetate cover page. This is acetate from my stash. It's from DIY Shop. It's super old. I have no idea how old it is. I've had it for a long time. 2016. So it's literally been sitting in my stash unused for that long. It's time to get it in my album. I really like these stars. So I'm thinking that would be a fun kind of just opening overlay page for my title page. So that is my plan. Let's see how it goes.
Okay, so my plan is to stamp out December Documented 2020 and make that my title page. So I want to stamp December and Documented directly on that kind of bluish teal colored paper, but I think I want to stamp the 2020 on some white paper and then fussy cut it out because I want it to stand out. I want to pop it up on some foam, and I think the red directly on that kind of minty paper is not going to look the way I want it to. So my plan is to stamp that out on white. Right now I'm just going over, this is a brand new stamp set, so I'm just going over it with my my sand eraser really quickly, just going over the whole thing so I don't have to worry about it after that, just to kind of remove some of that residue from manufacturing. It helps just get a really good impression of the stamp. So I'm going to actually grab, at first I grab a little like pad, like what am I trying to say? Not a mouse pad. It was a stitching mat, but I decided to grab the inside mat from my Misty instead to use that to stamp on. I just need something. When I stamp with these Distress Oxide inks on my glass mat, I don't get a super good impression, so I need something that has a little give to it. So I was going to use that stitching mat, but instead decided to grab my Misty mat to see if that would work, and it actually does. It works really well, which makes sense since it's for stamping. But I'm just stamping out 2020 essentially, not in order, because I was just stamping the 2s and 0s separately. And I stamped an extra 2 because the first one I thought maybe didn't get a great impression, but I ended up using it anyway, so I think it probably would have been fine with just the 2, but no worries. I'm just stamping on some scratch cardstock. This is actually the same heavyweight cardstock I used to print my journal cards on, which you can see there in the upper right-hand corner. I have a stack of them. Those are the digitals from December. And I printed actually 2 of them. The 2 that were 4x6, I turned into 3x4 cards and had them just on this extra sheet of paper that I didn't have anything else to print on. So I had just kind of a half sheet just lying around and decided to use that to stamp on. It's not any kind of fancy paper. Actually, I will be sure to link that down below. It's a really nice heavy duty paper. It prints really well. It stamps really well. It's not Nina. It's not anything like that. And I think it's less expensive than any of those other options. But I really like it. So that is what I tend to use. It's also a very nice bright white. Okay, so I'm just fussy cutting out the numbers here. This is nothing outrageous, nothing crazy or super creative, just stamping out 2020 and fussy cutting it out. If you are not a fussy cutter, which, I kind of go through phases, whether I like to fussy cut or whether it just drives me crazy. Sometimes I find it really relaxing and sometimes it just feels like the worst job in the world. But I like to use these scissors, which are actually from American Crafts, and they're longer. They have a longer blade. They're still kind of fine point and fine tip, but they're not like cutter bee. They don't have that extra fine point. So if it's something that has a really delicate, like cutting out a floral or something, I will grab my fine point scissors. But these are kind of the same blade, but it has a longer blade, and I find that I have just so much more control with that than I do with those shorter scissors. So I've really been enjoying using these to fussy cut. And again, I'll link those down below. Mine are super old, but I know they still have a version of these that is still available. So I'll link those as well. And I'm just very carefully cutting around the edge, leaving a white border because I want it to stand out from that mint background that I am planning to use. So now I can just clear away all those little bits of paper that are left over from the stamping, and I can, there you saw, just very briefly, that little stamp pad that I was going to use. It's actually a stitching mat from Amy Tangerine, but I had been using that to stamp on, but I thought, why not try the Misty pad? And it worked just fine. Okay, so I am going to cut down my background paper now. I'm just measuring a page protector, a full-size page protector from the Life Crafted album, because I can never remember the exact size of those pages to remember what I need to trim the paper to. So I quickly measured and then cut it down to size, and then I'm going to go ahead and punch holes in it because I want to make sure that my decoration, my stamping and other decoration doesn't interfere with a hole punch. So what I should have realized when I punched those holes is that my titles would need to be off center. So they would, to be centered on the part of the paper that doesn't have the holes, it actually needs to be slightly offset to the right, and I absolutely did not think of that when I went to stamp. I just found the center of the paper and started stamping from there, which you'll see here in just a second, and therefore my title ends up being lopsided. But that's okay. I make it work. You'll see here in a little bit. I do just go with it and make it work. But right now, I'm just giving myself some really light pencil marks as a guide. So I'm using my T-square ruler. I placed those fussy cut numbers in the center to see kind of what the spacing needed to be. And then I'm using this stamp set to stamp December documented. I want to grab one of these letters to make sure that I get the spacing on the bottom. So I'm going to stamp December above my year and then documented below. And so I'm just using that stamp to make sure there's plenty of space between the numbers and where I need to start the stamping. So now I have two really light pencil lines there. Again, I'm going to grab my Misty. So at first, I thought I would actually use the Misty for this. I thought, why not just lay out the letters and stamp the whole thing all at once? That way I can make sure to get it straight. I thought that was a great idea. And then I go to start placing these tiny stamps and realize that this is not going to work. So I get a few on there and then I go to start adding another one, and they're very sticky. You know, they're photopolymer stamps. They're sticky. I grab my scissors to try and get it in their exact right place, but as soon as something else touches it, it gets out of line, and then they all get out of line, and I was going to go absolutely out of my mind trying to place all these little letter stamps down all at once. So I decided, nope, not doing that. I'm just going to go ahead and stamp each letter individually and not use the Misty. So because I already had the sheet in the Misty and it was kind of held in place by that magnet, I just decided to leave it there and go ahead and stamp inside that Misty. And I'm just using the Door of the Misty to hold my stamp pad and my little scratch paper. I'm stamping off these numbers just to make sure that I get a good impression. Since they are new, I did use my sand eraser to go over them really quickly, but I just want to make sure that I'm getting a really good impression for each one, since I am stamping directly onto my background paper, and I do not have another sheet of this, so this is it. So yeah, I want to just make sure that I'm getting a good impression. That's why I am stamping off on that extra sheet of paper. And then I also have my, what is that called? Stamp Shammy. It's a stamp chamois from Lawn Fawn. That's what I'm using to clean my stamps. You can see it's very dirty. I use it pretty often. I just keep it on that little middle tray because it is wet. I don't like to just have it laying on my desk, but keeping it on that little metal tray works just fine, and it does dry out really quickly, but I have to remember to wet it down before I start stamping or before I start any project, and I do remember about half the time. The other half of the time, I generally just grab a baby wipe from my desk. So either way works just fine, right? Okay, so you can start to see now my stamping is definitely not centered on the part of the page that I want it to be centered on. So I used the ruler on the Misty and just looked at what was halfway across the width of the entire page. I wasn't thinking about those holes and how visually I would need to center it on the part of the page that didn't have the holes on it. But that's okay. So I'm just going with it. I'm going to go ahead and spell out documented. I did write down the word documented in pencil on that scratch piece of paper because I wanted to make sure, A, that I spelled it right and stamped it right, and B, that I found the middle of the word. So that helps. Just writing it down helps me figure out what the middle of the word is. And I like to start in the middle and work out. I find I do a much better job of centering. And if I had actually meant it to be centered on the entire page, that would have worked just fine here as well. But of course, that was not really what I wanted to do, and I just didn't know it yet. So my stamping is not perfect. Some of them are a little off. You can see the C is a little crooked there. Some of them drop below the line a little bit. I tried my best to get them as straight as I could, but I didn't, and that's fine. It's handmade. It's supposed to look handmade. So I'm totally okay with it being just a little bit off the line. Not a big deal. So I'm nearly done stamping this long title now. You can see it didn't take a super long time, but it took enough time. I was ready to be done with this stamping. And now that I am, I can start putting the page together. So I'm just going to clear away all this stamping business, and then I can start kind of figuring out where the rest of the elements on this page are going to go. So I really like that Be Merry. And I don't remember what the first part of that phrase is, but you can see it says Be Merry. I really like that on this page, and I really like it with the Fa La La tag that's at the top. So I know I want to use those. And then I thought about using that Joy, but I decided instead to go with that Merry and Bright. I wanted something that brought a little bit more black. Since I stamped in black, I wanted something that had a little bit of black on it elsewhere on this page. So that is what I decided to do. I do go ahead and distress the edges of these, which is not something I do very often, but I felt like it just looked a little too flat on the page otherwise. Like it just didn't have enough texture. So I went ahead and just used the edge of my scissors. I don't have a fancy distressing tool, and you really don't need one. The edge of your scissors will work just fine. Or you can even, if you have strong fingernails, you can even use your fingernails. My fingernails are not strong at all, so I use my scissors. I am going to add some foam adhesive behind these numbers, the fussy cut numbers, just to help them stand up off the page. I'm using these tiny dots. I think these are from scrapbook.com. I believe that's where I got them from. They're no longer in the packaging, and I've had them for quite a while, so I'm pretty sure that's where they're from. The really small foam dots. They're pretty thin. They're not super thick, which is what I like about them. And then I'm also, oh no, I'm not. I'm going to just adhere the others. I was thinking I was going to add foam behind that Be Merry die cut as well. I considered it, but eventually I decided just to go ahead and adhere it straight down to the page. So now that I have the foam on all of these, I'm thinking about where I want to place them. And at first I thought I would place them all the way to the right edge, or kind of really close to the right edge of the page, to kind of balance out my my mistake of stamping. And you can see I even placed down that 0 and then immediately decide, no, what I'm going to do to make it feel more balanced is to add a strip of trim down the right hand side. So I scooch that little 0 over and add the 2020 more towards the center, not totally towards the center, but more towards the center than it was originally. And go ahead and peel off all of the little tiny foam backers and stick that down. What I forgot to do before I did that was to erase those pencil marks. So I'm going to go in here in just a second and erase those marks very carefully. I wasn't actually sure how this cardstock would behave once I added or once I tried to erase from it, but it worked just fine. I didn't press very hard with the eraser. I did it very lightly, and it worked totally fine to remove those pencil marks. Okay, so this is where I was thinking, I'm going to add some trim down this side. It's just a matter of figuring out what trim. So I grab my container of ribbons and trims. This is my edited down version. If you saw my Organize with Me video from earlier this year, you may recognize it. It's working out really great so far. I'm really happy with this new storage option. I'll link that video down below as well. And I chose this felt kind of scallop trim that I think I got at Target a couple years back from the dollar spot. And I'm just going to add the tiniest amount of adhesive to one side and add that to the right hand side of the page, trying to get it as straight as I can, which is sometimes hard with ribbon, but I just, say do your best and make it look as even as possible. I'm going to trim off the edges, and then I'm going to bring out my sewing machine and add some stitching down that trim. So I do that off camera. I had white thread in my sewing machine, so that's what I ended up using, mostly because I was just too lazy to switch out the thread. But it probably would have looked really cute with some gold thread or even red thread, something like that, or mint. That same color mint would have been cool too. White's going to be just fine for me though. So I'm just using some washi tape to secure the threads on the back side and trimming off the excess of those threads just to make sure that they are not going to unravel. And then I can finish off this page by adding those other embellishments that I already have pulled out here. So I am just working out how I want them to go. I think that's exactly how they're going to be. But I'm going to fuss around with the placement of these two for quite a while. I don't know why I had such a hard time getting this the way I wanted it. At first, I had them overlapped a bit less, like one was sticking out further on one side, and then I struggled to get them straight, and eventually I just go with it. It's fine. No, I'm going to peel it up again and try and get it straighter, and then I'm just going to go with it. So I'm going to do the same with this top one, this top banner, just distressing the edges and then adding a little bit of adhesive because I'm going to come in with my stapler and staple that on. I'm also going to peel up the ends just to give it a little bit of dimension. I guess I was feeling like I just needed lots of texture and dimension on this page for this day, but I end up really liking the way that it looks. So that is the page pretty much done. I'm going to put it in the album to see how it looks, and then I can start on that calendar page. So I'm going to trim down this acetate just to add it in front. And I debated whether or not to put something on top of it, like to embellish it on the front page. And so far I've left it blank. You'll see I do try a couple different options, but I wasn't really entirely happy with how any of them looked. So I'm going to just leave it blank for now. And if I later on decide that I want to add something different to the front of it, then I will do so. But yeah, we'll see. So I'm also going to trim down these calendar pages while I have my trimmer out. And the way I printed these, I brought them into a canvas in Photoshop, an 8.5 by 11 canvas, and sized them to be the size of a Life Crafted page. But I must have measured wrong, or I had my print settings wrong, or I did something wrong in the process, and they were definitely not the right size. So my original plan was to you can see I have that extra space down the middle. I was going to cut it in half and then add the punches, the holes in that white space, and then I would have 2 full pages, but that did not work. So I ended up just trimming it in half, thinking I could just kind of mount it on or mat it with a larger piece of paper. Which is essentially what I end up doing. Although you'll see I'm going to end up trimming them down even more, just so they're going to end up being the size that they are when you purchase them. They're going to be the actual size of a traveler's notebook page, the kind that would slip inside of a pocket, but I don't put them in the pocket. You'll see here in just a second. So I brought out those rosettes I had made previously to see if I maybe wanted to add one of those in the front, and I may still, but I decided, yeah, I wasn't entirely happy with them, so I'm just going to hold off and try again later on. Okay, so here is where I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to make these work, and I decide just trim it down. Just trim it down to the size it was originally and just adhere it to the back of these 2 pages. So I have the title page on the left side, and then on the right side is my reason why page. So I'm just going to use those as basically mats for these calendar pages. But because I have the red paper on the left, I want to have red around my my calendar on the right hand side as well. Except, like I said, I don't have another sheet of this paper, so I'm going to have to do some Frankensteining and kind of piece this together to make it work behind this this calendar. And the only real issue I ran into is that the page was slightly taller than the calendar page, and I had to trim it down because I couldn't really work out how to give it a border above and below, and there wasn't a border above or below on the other side of the page, so I ended up trimming it down, and it did kind of cut into the other side of the page a little bit, but again, I'm not going to worry about it. It's not going to be perfect, and that's totally fine. So I will deal with that when I finish my reason why page soon. Hopefully I get that done soon since we're already into December. But yeah, I'm not going to stress about it. So I'm just adding some heavy duty double-sided tape to make sure that this adheres well, especially because there's stitching on both sides of this page, and it's going to go over those threads, those kind of stitched areas. So I want to make sure it stays stuck. So I added some double-sided tape. That's from scrapbook.com. And I added quite a bit to make sure it stays well and stuck. And then I am just going to peel off the backing and stick it down to the page. And I'm trying to get it as close to even on all sides, like on making the right hand side the same as the left hand side. And I think it's close enough. It's not perfect, but it's close enough. So I did need to trim off just a little bit there at the bottom. It overhung the bottom of the page, and then that's pretty much it. I'm not going to decorate this calendar page. You'll see in the photo, I've just kind of placed some things down, but none of that is actually adhered. I'm not entirely sure what I need to add to this calendar, so I'm just letting it go until I'm further into the month, and then that's it. That is this page, or these pages, all done. I hope you enjoyed watching this process. Thank you so much for stopping by, and I will see you all back here soon.